This episode is brought to you by Apollo in Rocky 3 and his legendary quote, "Eye of the tiger, stallion. Eye of the tiger."
Welcome to the Stephan Dyer Podcast, my people.
Welcome to the Stephan Dyer Podcast. I have here the unbreakable, the unmistakable, the highly capable Gustavo Chávez. I am so excited for him to be on the Stephan Dyer Podcast, where we welcome people with remarkable stories for amazingly vulnerable conversations. Gustavo is here, but he can't talk right now because I'm doing the famous intro. Gustavo Chávez is a made in Korea Ecuadorian who not so long ago became a Canadian citizen. Having lived in 9 cities across 7 different countries, Gustavo fueled his growth by continually exposing himself to waves of significant personal and professional change. Currently, Gustavo lives in Toronto with his wife Caro and works as a director of sales for Pivotree. I cannot be more excited to speak to the Wolf of Wall Street, Bay Street, Ecuadorian Street on sales, leadership, being a nomad like I have been, and his many, many talents, not just imitation, but being extremely, extremely charismatic. My friends, please welcome Gustavo! How are you, my friend?
I'm great. Thank you for having me here.
I felt like you were going to jump into the ring and fight somebody.
I was mind blown. I don't think I have ever introduced myself as well as you introduced me right now. So that's
bring me to your sales calls.
Yeah, apparently. Like, hey, he's going to sell me so then I can sell you something else.
I love it, man. Dude, every one of our friends, including Obama, who's been on the podcast, says that you are the greatest salesman that we've known at our group of friends. I don't think they're lying. And we're gonna get into sales, but tell me a little bit about why did you move around so much, and how did that contribute to you being so charismatic, outgoing? And I feel like you have this, I'm not even going to call it a double-edged sword, but I feel like you got this, you know when to turn it on and you know when to turn it off. If it's like, let's party, you can be the party animal. If it's business, you can be the business guy. If it's sales, you can sell. If it's like being serious, you can also be that guy. And I feel like living in different countries gave you that, because I've also lived in 5 different countries, and having to adapt and make new friends kind of not only is it a like master's in self-awareness, but because you get to know a lot about yourself, but when you know yourself, you can know others. And then by having to make new friends, you have to read a room, you become a master at fitting in. Why did you move around so much, and how did this impact your personality?
Okay, so my parents is really the reason why I had to move around. I was actually, to your point, born in Korea, Ecuadorian, born in Korea.
Oh, really? Born in Korea?
Yeah,
I know you lived in Korea.
No, I was born there. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And were you also made there?
I believe so. The timing aligns. But yeah, I was born in Korea. My father still in active duty in Ecuador as an Ecuadorian diplomat, not in Ecuador, currently in Indonesia. So it gives you an idea of like how
currently
crazy.
Right now?
Right now. Like
wow.
This moment, he's actually probally sleeping. He's
insane.
About to wake up in a few hours for his day.
And by that you mean like a diplomat as a ambassador? Or?
Yeah. He's the ambassador for Ecuador based out of Jakarta.
Yeah.
For different countries in the region. So
very nice.
Cool. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So basically, his very first post abroad away from Ecuador was in Seoul in Korea.
Wow.
And what's even funnier is my mom was also working in the, like, I guess, foreign ministry. I mean, Relaciones Exteriores, Spanish. And they met there. They started dating. And shortly, not immediately after, but kind of shortly after they started dating, he was basically told, you got to go. And he just basically said, all right, do you want to come with me? Come, like, marry me and come with me. And she was like, okay, fine, let's do this. Yeah.
And how long have they been married now?
I think I was born 2 years after they got married.
So
roughly.
20 years married.
Yeah, exactly. Like 18. Okay, no. So there would be 36 years. That's roughly. Insane. Yeah, 36, 37.
And after Korea, where did you go?
So after Korea, so born there, spent 3 years there, then went to Ecuador as a.
Did you learn how to speak Korean as a baby?
I didn't.
Chicha?
Well, what's funny is I call myself Korean when it's convenient to me to be Korean. Like, I know Korean food and I know this and K-pop. I love K-pop and I love it, right? But obviously it's cultural appropriation, and I just joke a lot about it. But yeah, after that I went to Ecuador, and this was the first time really meeting my family, like my extended family, my cousins, and being surrounded by languages that weren't for the most part English, because in Korea at the time there was a big U.S. presence, and still is, right? Big U.S. base. So like my parents used to hang out a lot there and met a lot of other diplomats from other countries, and Ecuador as well, that were just kind of hanging out there. So English was kind of the common tongue amongst everybody.
Yeah.
Went to Ecuador, and I joined like a school there for just a couple of years. I spent probably 3 years there, and then we were sent to Belgium. So I went from like not learning how to speak it and write anything to starting to learn how to speak Spanish to like full on learning French, right?
Wow.
Because in Brussels, that's the first language there, right? And you don't really speak Flemish. This is the other language in Belgium. But it was kind of crazy, right? None of my parents spoke French either, but that comes with a job, just having to adapt and taking courses. And while we were in school, my mom would take French courses, so she could understand things and help with like other things,
the day to day
in the family. And my dad was also learning kind of like on the job, like more specific, like job related stuff. It's kind of the opposite. He was pretty useless at the day to day stuff, and he only learned French for work related stuff.
The technical stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Over time, and he had a gift with languages. He has a good hearing, so he pronounces words pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
He has a good grasp for language, especially Latin languages like Portuguese or Italian and French. It became easy for him to just communicate at a very basic level. He never got like super deep, but just good enough. So then after that, 2 years and a half later, we go to Geneva. So this is still like elementary school time, but this is the first time in years that I'm like, I speak the language. Think about it, right? Like I'm going into third grade. This is the first time in my life. This is the first time in my life where I'm like, I can communicate with other kids.
Wow.
Right?
How old were you?
Third grade? I don't know, like 8, 9 years old. Yeah. 8.
Wow.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy, right?
French.
Yeah.
And after, so these are becoming your formative years. How long did you stay in Switzerland, and what happened next?
So after Europe, that was basically like the last leg in Europe. Was there for another 2.5 years, finished elementary school almost, basically. Then went back to Ecuador. By the time I went back to Ecuador, I was like, I had never written anything in Spanish in my life. But
you spoke Spanish at home with your parents?
I spoke Spanish at home with my dad, and we spoke French with my mom, which became like a thing, like from the Belgian days.
Yeah.
To learn.
To not lose it, maybe?
Not lose it and learn it, and just like full on immersion. It's not like you get an escape from French when you get home, and she wanted to learn it as well. Yeah, and she still speaks it too, which is kind of crazy.
Do you still speak to each other French? Or?
No, not anymore. Because then other things happen, right? And life took us different places. But so then 3 years in Ecuador, it was just great. Me actually spending time with my family and getting closer to my cousins and like aunts, uncles, grandparents. All that was great. Also getting a little bit more familiar with what Ecuador is, right?
Yeah.
Because the first time I was there was 3.
Exactly.
So learning what Ecuadorian food is and what the different parts of Ecuador are. I didn't, like most people that are staying in their country, I won't say most, but many people that stay in their country just take it for granted, and they don't explore it enough until they leave, and then all of a sudden they want to go back and play tourists.
100%.
So very much that was very much the case. And then after that, we went to the States.
Where?
Washington, D.C. So he was working out of D.C. Oh, yeah? Cool.
Yeah.
Do you like it? Have you been?
I've been many times. In 2001 was one of the, because my uncle worked at the International Monetary Fund, and when we lived in El Salvador in 2001, there was a huge earthquake. So we went there for like 2 months, like as the country stabilized, and then now my sisters live there, so I went last year, and I like it a lot. Yeah,
it's a really cool city, and it's turned into this like capital, boring, kind of like nothing happens kind of city to a much more lively, just fun city with things to do and things to explore. I really like.
My sisters live in Navy Yard. I think it's called Navy Yard. I think it's a newer, younger demographic place.
I was much younger, so like my concept of cool was skipping class at some point, right? And
you weren't like partying at Navy Yard when you were 11.
No. My idea of cool back then was like, we're skipping PE class and we're going to Starbucks. Yeah, no, and we're not telling anybody. That was kind of my idea of cool. But we spent some time there, and I think one of the things that happens too, and then that we haven't really talked about, is why so much change. Because it's normal for diplomats to be moving from place to place, but it's not as normal to move as frequently, and it has to do a lot with the political instability that we see in our countries. And when people like my dad started in the foreign service career, his foreign service career, like from basically the very bottom as a career diplomat, which means that he was not politically affiliated at any point. But in our countries, as you know, political affiliation can do a lot of things.
Good or bad.
Good or bad, right? But the point is, if you're not, it's almost like if you're not one of us, then you're just not one of us. And so every time there was a new change of power, they brought their people, they brought their team, and it almost kind of happened every single time, right? And every time it was like, okay, we have new people coming in, so we have to go somewhere else. We're told to go somewhere else, and this became a constant thing. So this was a bit of like the theme around it, and our situation in Washington was cut short, much shorter than usual, even because of that particular reason, with kind of like some literally some misunderstandings at the time with like the government at the time thinking they wanted to place their people, but they didn't really understand who their people were. And, they saw something as silly as taking down like a painting or like a portrait of the president because the walls were being painted as a reason to say that is, subversive.
Wow.
That is subversive, and this person does not belong here anymore. We're going to ship them to other places. And that happened to a number of people at the time. But again, it's kind of surreal, right? But this is Latin American politics, because I talked to other people that have had similar experiences, and they're like, "Oh yeah, one time," and then they tell me their story, and I'm like, "Oh, I guess we're all messed up in a way, right?" Which is kind of tricky. But then
after DC,
we went to Caracas, Venezuela.
No way! In your teenage years,
yes, which was perfect for me.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was going to be perfect. I originally hated the idea of leaving Washington. It was from 2004 to 2007.
Wow.
Yeah.
So things weren't that bad.
Hold on a second. Things were not that bad, but when I was there, people said it was the worst it's ever been. And it cannot get any worse.
That's the constant.
Yeah.
Wow.
Always.
How old were you? So it's like it's like when I lived in Mexico, 14, 15, it's like my party years.
Yeah, totally.
Starting to party and socialize.
Totally. So what this gave me, right, because I loved, like, life in Washington was great. It was safe. I liked school. I liked my friends. I liked everything. But it was very American. Like my lifestyle was
the most American.
Yeah. Tremendous. But he, I was thinking about Trump right now. But what that did to me was actually introduce me to my culture, not Venezuelan culture, but like Latino culture.
Yeah.
Because
huge.
I always associated with like, that's old people stuff, like merengue, salsa. And then all of a sudden I go to Venezuela and like we go to a party and I see like the prettiest girls were like dancing with like all the guys. And I'm like, I don't know how to dance. I don't know how to like talk to a girl like these other guys know how to talk to girls. Like, and for me it was just like a culture shock, but like the food again became this kind of like new thing. We go from like American food to arepas and cachapas and hallacas and all these
empanadas, tequeños.
And the versions of the same things that we have across all of Latin America, but like, you know, the Venezuelan version of it. Dude, I loved my time in Venezuela. I had a great time. The people there were fantastic. It's unfortunate that things happened the way it happened for Venezuela. I actually, I told my parents when I was about to graduate, I think I want to stay in Venezuela and do university here. And they were like,
no, it's not gonna happen.
Nah, man, not a good idea.
What was your I'm very curious because when you're changing a lot, as you know, my family is Peruvian, but I was born in Costa Rica. Then I moved to El Salvador, then Mexico, then Montreal, then Toronto. Yeah. And basically, my ins with the new school, with the new friends, with the new blah blah blah. My ins were soccer.
Yeah.
And probably humor.
Yeah.
And sports in general. I was a kind of responsible student, but I was always the guy laughing at everybody's jokes in class. I got kicked out of class because I laughed so much. But soccer and humor were my ins to connect with everybody. Yeah. I'm very similar probably in your case. What were your ins, or what did you? How did you connect with people?
That's a good question. You know, I remember one of my first few conversations, like I guess both in the US and in Caracas, being about music.
Uh-huh.
And just like, you know, I would have like my Discman at the time.
Yeah.
This is actually right when the iPod was coming out, right? But I would have my Discman or my MP3 player, and would be like, what do you listen to? And it was just like, I don't know, Metallica or something.
Yeah.
Something crazy. Like, yo, I like Metallica. That's cool. And then all of a sudden you have like a little something. It's like, hey, we're going to get some empanadas with the other guys. You want to come with? I'm like, yeah, I want to. Let's go get some empanadas.
And were these schools like where all their international students would go to?
No. So generally speaking, because we rarely aligned with the calendar year when we had to move, which is also inconvenient. So it was like wherever was the best school we could get that would take us, given the fact that they're like already...
Oh, you and your brother too?
Exactly, my brother and I.
Is it just the two of you, or do you have more siblings?
Okay, yeah, two of us. Yeah, that I know.
That I know. Santi. Shout out to Santi.
Shout out to Santi.
In Ottawa? Gatineau?
In Gatineau, yeah.
In Gatineau. We're going on the 28th. Shout out to everybody in Ottawa. 28 or 29. We're going to Montreal and Ottawa to do a show. Santi, we'll see you there. Bring all your friends and everybody who can at least understand hola at this comedy show.
And he is going to come to Toronto.
And then he's going to come to
Toronto. For his own show. Yeah. Exactly.
How did you end up? Tell me, you graduated high school in Venezuela?
I did.
And how and why? Okay, this is
I know where this is going.
New Brunswick, out of all places, the second Ecuadorian capital.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Diego, who's probably listening to this, our great friend Diego Suá, and several other Ecuadorians,
Santi, Pevan, Andres, the other
Pablo, well, I know Tienen is not Ecuadorian, but Tienen was also
part of them. Yeah.
How and why? I also went to high school in Quebec.
Yeah.
But I never really not even consider. I didn't even know Canada that well to be understand. I went to the University of Toronto, but the director of sales at the University of New Brunswick has to be like some sort of a genius to recruit 1 billion Ecuadorian. Why New Brunswick?
They were really smart about the recruiting in Ecuador.
Yeah.
Specifically, right? Because I was told about this when I lived in Venezuela, but the connection was made because my counselor in Venezuela knew a bunch of Ecuadorians that went to this university that she felt was a good fit for me because it was a number of reasons that I could elaborate in a moment, but it was like, you should look into this university. And I'm like, okay. And to me, the biggest thing was I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. But I had to go to university.
Yeah.
Because that's what people do, you know?
Yeah.
So I had to go to university, and I did not want to start an engineering degree. I did not want to get into medicine. I did not want to get into law. I did not want to get into
diplomacy.
My dad was like, if you want to be a diplomat, just don't do it for Ecuador, please. Because, yeah.
What did you study? Business?
No, not even, right? Because I ended up studying like political science because that was like dad's influence.
Really?
And somewhere along the way, I came across a communications class, and I'm like, this is something I could keep doing for the rest of my I didn't think like long term, but at least for the rest of my undergrad, I could keep taking these classes. It was communications and journalism and just the writing piece and the PR aspect of it and a little bit of theory because it was a liberal arts school, so it was very like,
liberal,
very, very liberal and very like pie in the sky stuff, aspirational stuff as well, with obviously some practical stuff. But yeah, like I actually didn't think of like I want to go to New Brunswick and that's what I want to do. I had no idea New Brunswick existed, right? But when I was told, look at the school, here's why I think it's going to be good for you. You can go there, take a bunch of classes. You don't have to declare a major until your second year. You can take a bunch of things. And this university actually encourages you to take a bunch of things that are not part of what they consider your major, even after you declare it. So the idea is you get well-rounded at a bunch of things. And there was a very, again, aspirational idea that it helps you become a better citizen, a better person, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, all right, that sounds good. And if I don't like it, or I find something else that I like, maybe I'll transfer somewhere else after 2 years later. So I didn't end up transferring. I ended up staying there for, I got really involved. Like I started like SWOW 0.0 with Diego.
What was it called? The
Lua. Yeah. Lua with Diego. My first year with
organizing parties in New Brunswick with Latin flavor.
Diego looks at me. He goes, "You're Ecuadorian, right?" He's like, "Yeah, we should talk."
How do you know? I have you have an Ecuadorian jersey on you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, your face is painted with the colors of Ecuador. That's why. Yeah.
And so how does this go? I love these stories because obviously, like Steve Jobs says, you can only connect the dots looking backwards in many ways. And Diego and Swan and our group of friends have been instrumental for me being here and doing stand-up comedy. The first time we did comedy was at Latin Live in Swan. And in many ways, this whole group of friends has been for over the past 10 years, because my life before 2012-13 was very Canadian. And it's been very instrumental, but I always like to deconstruct how you came to like how we came to be where we are right now. And how did you go from being somebody who maybe didn't know what you wanted to do, took a communications class, obviously had probably very good interpersonal skills by that time because you had moved around a lot, and that kind of brings that out of you, and going to a incredible salesperson who has gone from company to company. You live in New York City as well. It's not like salesman is not just being charismatic, because there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. There's a lot of taking feedback from potential mentors. I just did a cold sales call downstairs for a sponsorship at a Dominion Waivers and Pardons. And dude, I was in there for an hour, and I came out. I sold like a $7,000 in sponsorship the day before. And then I went there and I came out and I'm like, man, I should quit this sales thing. And then today I sold like another like $5,000 for the Latin Comedy Fest. And it's an up and down battle, and you can't just depend on energy and motivation. Like people think like, it's easy to sell. You just have to be charismatic. But no, it has a lot of work behind it. What have you done to become so good through the years? Because you're probably better now than you were 10 years ago. How did you get into sales, and how did you discover this was a path that you wanted to pursue?
I always liked this aspect of interpersonal skills, to your point. And in my later years at university, I actually went out of my way because I felt the program was not giving me enough practical experience on my way out. So before I had to do like what's called the co-ops and the internships.
Although they had co-ops,
it was more of an internship.
Okay.
But yeah, that was mandatory for the program. I actually went a year earlier and did my own internship.
Wow.
I actually was like, wherever I can get it. I ended up getting one with a team on campus that was like communications for the university itself. And then that summer, I'm like, okay, I don't want to just have. I was essentially staying every summer and working like most Canadians do and all that. I'm like, now this year I'm going to invest in the career piece. and I'm going to find whatever it takes. So I actually found some contacts in Ecuador that gave me an internship there. But the point
that gave you an internship in Ecuador.
In Ecuador, so I went back to Ecuador and I did a 4-month-long internship with basically the group that owns in Ecuador that owns KFC, Baskin Robbins, Juan Valdez, Pizza Hut, and a bunch of others, right? And I think that was pretty cool because I was given. There was no like PR person, and they were like, "Let the intern do it." You know? but I also had a lot of rope because they were like, "We don't get it, we don't care, we just know it's cool, just do it." And honestly, they just let me do a lot of things that as an intern, I don't think many interns have had the chance to do like things that I did. So I was super excited about it and meeting people and calling people and getting like finding. Almost like managing a budget almost as an intern, like 21, and going and getting these things to happen. But I was excited. That's the best part. I was not afraid of screwing up.
That's super important.
I was just excited about it. And I didn't care about failure. I'm like, if I fail, I fail, And that's kind of been one of the reasons why I think I've been successful, because in order to be a good salesperson, yes, charisma helps. But there's a lot of really successful people that are salespeople. The first thing you see is not necessarily charisma. You might see them as serious and like maybe
confident
to a point where people come across as arrogant and cocky. But there's just, to your point, there's so much work, and I think it comes down to bravery
for the close.
No, but bravery just in general, just being like, I'm going to be bold with my decisions. And I'm going to take some calculated risks. I'm going to recognize that they're risks. That's important because you understand that you're just not being reckless either. Yeah. Right? Or completely unself-aware of the things you're doing. But you identify them as risk and you see which risks am I going to take. And this is as part of a simple phone call. I'm going to ask a question I've never asked before. And this is how you start early on. You just get on the phone. You dial for dollars, basically. You say, okay, call these companies. This is my time in Salesforce. Call these companies and get them to do business with us, essentially. I'm just oversimplifying it. I'm like, okay, sounds good. And I would just call and call and call, and something wasn't working because it just wasn't. So I was just like, I'm going to try something else. Yeah. And that started getting results. But also,
what were those little things? I know you can't get into the nitty gritty, but what are some absolute don'ts for cold calling? Or what are some musts for cold calling that in order for people to not hang up on you that you've discovered through the years?
Yeah, I feel like most people don't pick up the phone, to be honest. Yeah. Right? It takes a few calls to reach them. And I think it's about being like, if I get 10 seconds of their time, how do I get another 30 seconds of their time?
Yeah, the hook. Yeah. Hook
like, how do I hook them with 10 seconds? And you have to like know that at some point somebody's going to pick up the phone. This is one of my early lessons. I was probably call hundreds of people before the first person picked up. And then when the person picked up the phone, I froze. I had no idea. I was like, I'm trained for this. I've been looking for this call. But the second someone picked up the phone, I was just not expecting it. I was basically on autopilot, just leaving voicemails. And then somebody picks up the phone, I'm like, what do I do now? Yeah. And I was like, this is, and then I'm like, damn it. I screwed that one up. But then again, I remember, I'm like, this is a game of no's, right? This is a game of no's, of people ignoring you. So what's that going to do? Lesson learned, right? At any point, somebody can pick up the phone. So stay focused, just keep going. And if you screw up,
stay ready for when the opportunity.
Yeah. And if you screw up, you screw up, right? I think that's the other piece. But you also mentioned preparation before. Yeah. It's important. And it's not about having a script, but it's about just being confident about what am I going to say? Why am I calling this person? What do I know about this person that might be helpful in my hook? What do I know about the company? What can I read about it in advance? And you can't do that necessarily for every company you call because there's a lot, right? Especially if your list is high, if you get measured based on activities. But you can basically cherry pick the ones you think are, you want to focus on. And there's no silver bullet. There's no like secret recipe that will guarantee you these things, no matter what people say. I think it comes down to discipline. Yeah. And the discipline of just keep doing it, and it's going to happen.
I like that.
And you talked about motivation and creating your motivation, creating your energy. Sometimes there's no motivation, there's no energy.
Yeah.
But that's when the discipline kicks in.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. For you, for me in the comedy world, at least, something changed when I started to read books and take workshops. Because a lot of people would say, and still say, comedians say like, oh no, the best teacher is getting on stage. And yeah, that's fine. And some people say the best teacher in sales is cold calling or making those phone calls or being in sales calls. But experience is costly, and for example, I always say this, if it takes me 17 years getting on stage to make it to Netflix, cool. But if I get the same time on stage as all those times that I'm going to do it anyway, and I read comedy books, and I take a bunch of comedy workshops, and I ask for feedback, and I review my videos, it might take me 9 years to get to Netflix. So that's what a lot of people don't see. Tony Robbins says, like, people get rewarded in public for the things they do in private. What things have you done that you could recommend to people maybe starting in sales or potential newcomers, Latinos who listen to this podcast a lot? Are there any courses that you would recommend or books? To me, the most influential have been the Wolf of Wall Street, Straight Line Persuasion, that I have for free. If anybody wants to message me, I can give you the Google Drive. And the Never Split the Difference.
Such a good book.
By FBI negotiator Chris Voss, especially for introverts, because at least I saw sales as like, I'm very non-confrontational, and in the movies, or I don't know why I picture sales as somebody like bullying you into doing something or peer pressuring you. But with that book, you can almost, even if you're an introvert, 100% do it in a non-confrontational way and still steer the conversation into a desired outcome for you and a win-win for everybody. What things have been influential with you, apart from experience or maybe mentors? What has shaped your sales style?
So I've had great mentors, and I take like nuggets of wisdom from each one of them because they've all been fairly different, but they've left me with good like reminders of some certain things, like almost like conventional wisdom, like rules. Like, and these are not things you're going to necessarily find in, maybe you'll find them in books, but I've heard them from them.
Yeah.
So I associate them as my mentors, who have given me some of these bits of wisdom that I apply as soon as I can recognize an application for those. In terms of books, I think I personally liked to read a lot of books about sales methodology. So I'm a practical person. I like theory, but I also like to have different tools under my belt that I can use to recognize situations better. Yeah. So for example, there's a lot of different like frameworks. Like a very common framework, for example, for qualifying a deal, whether or not there's a real good deal in front of you, is something called BANT. That's like pretty industry standard.
BANT?
BANT.
What does that stand for?
It stands for budget, authority, need, and timeline. Okay. So you need to have do you have money to spend, or like, do you have a budget allocated for this, this advertisement that you want to, that you need? Or do you have, are you the person who signs a check? Are you the person who why do you need this? Why is this, why is this like a problem that you need to spend money on? Well, yeah, exactly. What's the reason behind the investment? And why now? What's the timing? Or when is the timing? And it can go in many different directions, but there's much more elaborate versions of the same kind of qualification process that become actually part of your sales process entirely, to manage it from start to finish, from the qualification phase all the way to closing it. And It's really cool because there's psychology involved. There's true like consultative, we call it consultative selling, or in solution selling, but it's about aligning with what the customer wants. And you talked about being a bully and pushing, and movies give salespeople a bad rep, no doubt. But the reality is the most successful salespeople that I've encountered in my career are the ones that are not perceived as this person just needs to hit a quota. But these people can also call those customers and say, hey, I need to hit my quota. Because they've built that credibility. They've built that support. They've helped the customer because they've been able to map not only you need a solution that we offer, but also what it does for you and help you quantify it and help you become a hero.
Yeah.
Right? So there's so many, like there's a challenger sale. There's one called the new strategic selling. There's so many. These are two that are top of mind for me right now. These are the ones that we've recently been reading and rereading at work. But there's a ton. That's another one that I really like. You talk about a negotiation. Never Split the Difference is good. There's one called Selling More that I like. And one of my mentors actually recommended it because his negotiation MBA teacher at Wharton wrote the book.
Oh, wow.
So he's like, you need to read this. And it helped me understand my mentor's way of thinking as well. I'm like, that's why he negotiates this way. And it's never about winning, right? And the idea exactly is about getting more. And confrontational, you can't be confrontational in negotiation. Chris Voss says that immediately. You have to diffuse it instantly.
Yeah, diffuse the negative.
Yeah, because they have a hostage.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, they hold a hostage. So you can't,
to uncover those black swans.
Yeah.
Super important. Do you do anything specific? I know this is very movie-like, but do you do anything specific to get into the... do you do any push-ups? Or do you tell yourself, or do you read a letter to yourself? Or do you get hyped up? Because sometimes, we say this in our workshops a lot, where about 70% of communication is body language and how you look. And if it's a phone call and they can't see your body language, they imagine your body language based on your tonality and your energy. And I'm not saying that to be the best salesman, you have to be like a Jim Carrey type of guy on the phone or whatever. But sometimes you do want to be your best self on that call. What do you do to prepare for that call in addition to the research that you do? Do you just read the stuff? Do you do a couple push-ups? Or do you have so much experience that you can just turn it on and you can turn it off? What type of things would you recommend to somebody that is starting for them to do and increase their odds of closing a deal?
So preparation, we talked about that before. So knowing who I'm talking to, not only the company, but the person.
How do you prepare? Do you stalk them on LinkedIn, Instagram? Company website?
Company website.
Instagram.
If they're a publicly traded company, there's public information about how the company's doing and what are the top priorities. You can generally find quotes from senior executives about why they perform a certain way, what are some of the challenges they encounter, what's their direction going forward. You can read the reports as well and see like where are they increasing investment, where are they decreasing investment.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of things like that you can read, and there's a lot of sources of information right now that also do this. Actually, for my interview for Pivotree, I was asked
frictionless commerce.
So that was given basically an assignment as the last part of the interview. And it was give us a plan to grow. So we have this what we think is an untapped account. Yeah. And it was an account that was a luxury fashion retailer for women's fashion. And we think it's largely untapped. We'd like to see how you think about approaching it and growing this account, because we think it's untapped. But we're not sure. So you got to tell us.
Oh, right? Boy.
So my conclusion there was, don't waste your time. This account, this company is going to file for bankruptcy in the next 6 months to 1 year. And it's just not like they're decreasing spend everywhere. They're selling all their assets. They're liquidating. But the discussion was, I didn't just tell them, but we should still try, right? But it was more like, guys, let's not waste our time with this. That was how I ended the presentation. This account is a waste of time. Don't do it.
Because there's a huge opportunity cost in pursuing stuff that's not worth pursuing.
Totally. But that preparation helped me understand, I would normally you just go to like, if you don't prepare and you don't read all these things, you go in. I'm like, yeah, we can grow the account. Don't worry. I know a few people there. I think, right? I'm connected to a couple folks. And
I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy.
Yeah. I know a guy who, I sold him something once upon a time, and I know someone there and whatever. But like, a lot of people still behave that way, and a lot of sales are still conducted that way. But people who prepare have an advantage.
So yeah, I 100% agree. So the preparation is one piece. Knowing your customer, knowing your audience.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything psychological or emotional or physical that you do on top of that?
Well, when I was an individual contributor,
what does that mean?
That means that I'm an individual salesperson with my own quota. Right now, I have a team, right? But it's different. It's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
When you're responsible for your own number, it almost feels like one of the LinkedIn sales influencers that I follow calls sales it's called the corporate athletes.
Oh yeah,
because it's so competitive, because it can be cutthroat. You win or you lose, and you need to prepare a lot. To your point, like, people recognize or praise in private what really or in public what really happens in private.
100%.
So it's like that tip of the iceberg illustration. Everything that happens below the water, underneath the water, is really that aspect of it that matters so much in you. Everything you can control. There's a lot of things you can't control. You can't control that a company goes bankrupt. You can't control that, they fire everybody that you're talking to. You can't control that your company is going through restructurings, and all the people that were helping you sell something all of a sudden are gone. There's so many things you can control, but it's important to identify the things you can control and find a path to keep them as much as possible within your control. And that starts with seeing things that are relatively basic, but still people get so busy and so carried away they don't do it, like setting expectations. One of those sales philosophies that we talked about before, that, because I like to have, take a little bit from different ones, has something called the upfront contract. So the upfront contract is essentially a concept that if I'm going to meet with you, here's what we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's upfront. You're like, we're agreeing that this is what we're going to talk about. These will be the contents of our discussion. And this is essentially what we understand as a criteria to continue further discussions. So you set that expectation, and they can tell you, well, we're not aligned. I want to talk about something else, or that works. Thank you. That's perfect. You can calibrate, but the idea is you're not wasting your time. You go in with a very clear expectation.
And you're qualifying your lead at the same time.
Totally. And the qualification is not usually like a one-time thing, right? You learn a few things. You can, of course, but you learn a few things and you keep learning things. And then as the deal advances or just as time goes by, sometimes it doesn't advance, it gets stalled. It's important to sometimes take a step back and requalify it. And like, why are we not moving forward? Has something changed? I like that, yeah. Has something changed?
Are there any questions? I'm a big fan of questions that uncover good information. Tim Ferriss says that productivity is not a matter of necessarily what you do, but it's also a function of asking better questions. Do you have any go-to questions that you always do in sales that have high impact or things that uncover problems that you could probably offer solutions to?
I think they're not specific to sales. There are some that are there. For example, this framework for selling called Sandler has the idea that there's essentially levels of questioning that you can take.
Okay.
At the most superficial level, somebody's taking a sales call because they have a problem, right?
Yeah.
And they have a problem, and that problem is usually, my printer doesn't work. And it's like, okay, so you're selling a printer, right? And I go, okay, no problem. I can help you with that. Right? And then the next level question could be like, okay, so why do you need a printer? Right? No, but like for real, because people are just like, oh, I have a printer, he needs one, easy peasy, and then just stop there. And that can work, but you're not going to uncover the motivations that are beneath that. So another example is, again, why do you need the printer? What is the impact of not having a printer?
Yeah.
Right? You know what? If I don't have a printer, I have to commute for 45 minutes to the nearest, I don't know, Staples or UPS store or whatever to print what I need. And, you know, I work part-time, I study full-time, I just don't have the time. So that is just that extra, you know, hour and a half that takes me to go there and back. Plus, if it's busy, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
Right? Those hour and a half to 2 hours are valuable time for me to study, to potentially work out, to cook a meal, because, you know, otherwise I don't know if I can eat because I have to work on my all-nighter.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I get it. And then like last but not least, right, you can get into it, and the printer's probably not the best example for this one, but and why do you need a printer? Why are you looking for the printer? And this is more when it comes to an organization. Why is this your problem to solve?
Yeah.
And that is your way to uncover a personal motivation, all the way from, you know what, I'm looking for a promotion. I think if we do this, I'm going to get promoted to a VP. And it's like, okay, cool. Or, you know what, this landed on my lap after a restructuring and I was just given a ton of responsibility. I'm overwhelmed and I'm trying to make this work. Yeah. Usually it takes a lot of work, a lot of rapport to get to that third, like, question and to get to true, like, real answers. You can ask them, of course, but you're not going to get real substance until you build real good rapport.
And you can use one of the Chris Voss's labeling. It sounds like, it seems like, it looks like you have a lot on your plate, and then they'll tell you more.
There you go.
And then you can uncover. There's a lot of ways to that. These are the only ones that I know, and I use them all the time.
But that's perfect, right? And that you're doing what you should be doing. Like, I think having more than one approach is helpful for different situations.
Yeah.
And the more you know, the more like you're like, oh, I'm going to use. You don't even think about it that way, but you're like, I know what to do in the situation, and I think from this particular methodology aligns closely, and you're just thinking automatically about it when you're doing it for so long. But you just nailed it. Like, labeling is exactly like a really good way of saying it sounds like you're overwhelmed. It sounds like you have a big weight on your shoulders. Yeah. You know, and it's like, yeah, help me. And it's like, don't worry, you know, and we'll help you. I got what you need. But just to answer your last question, right? So when it came down to being an individual contributor, you know, I think
corporate athlete.
Corporate athlete, indeed. I think it was you're in control of your time more, right? Because you're just depend on your own numbers, right? And that also gives you time to do other things that are fulfilling for yourself, right? So going to the gym, or going to, you know, walk your dog for a longer period of time, or going to a cafe and working from, like, honestly, just more autonomy to do more things like that. But to your point, what did I do personally? I used to love going to the gym, or going to, like, hit a boxing bag, right? To just blow off steam and then start my day like that. It was amazing. That was like, it just got me going. I was just like, perfect. Like, everyone's starting the day, I already did so much. Yeah. You know? And I loved that. And I think that we've lost some of that, A, just because I'm still adjusting to my new role, but B, because post-pandemic, and when everyone's plugged in all the time, man, there's a less free time. It's basically you unplug for as long as you can. You eat your dinner. You wake up. Sorry, you go to sleep.
And you go back to sit at your desk.
And you get back to sitting at your desk, and that is difficult, right? So I think a lot of companies, a lot of leaders are doing really good things to provide employees ways to recharge, but not just some people might not like me use this, like the kumbaya way, just like, oh, recharge and be happy, and, you know. But the reality is you need energy, and you need your discipline at some point will start to find some cracks, you know?
Absolutely. And productivity is not only a function of time, it's also about attention and energy.
Totally.
Which a lot of people don't take into account. The one thing I've heard so much from leaders and CEOs and executives in podcasts is that people managing is messy, man. And and I'm not saying it in your case, but in general, you went from being a top player in all the companies that you worked at, and now you are a director, which incorporates not just managing people, but now you're not the corporate athlete, you're the corporate coach.
Yeah.
So how have you evolved as a professional, and what advice would you give to other people venturing into leadership? Because I find that like 90% of the world hates their bosses. And then the bosses don't wake up wanting to be horrible people. It's just the dynamic at times. And the worst thing is you don't go to school to be a boss.
No.
There's no university to be a leader, you know? So it seems like the only way to learn how to people manage and be a director or a VP and to influence is to learn on the job. But sometimes that's not enough. And now you don't have time you have so much more on your plate. So how have you adjusted to people managing, dealing with other projects, maybe having less leisurely time? Now you're married. How have you been able to juggle all these new challenges?
And my wife, Caro, also became a manager.
There you go. So shout out to Caro.
So we're both kind of like in the same phase of our careers, like taking on our first leadership role, right? And we're both learning. It's kind of nice to have someone to talk to
cry together with.
Gloop. Just I'll be like, long day. Just like, just having my glass of whiskey with me.
Yes.
It's Monday, 3:00. What are you talking about?
It's been a long week. Tuesday, 10 a.m.
Yeah. Exactly. How do I think the adjustment process is long, right? It's not something you learn overnight. You can read as many books and you can follow the right leaders and hear the right quotes. But at the end of the day, you are accountable for results and the results of your team.
That's a tough pill to swallow at times.
Totally, right? But at the same time, sales has something that's good and bad. You're either performing or you're not performing.
Wow.
Right? And it's good because you're not wondering, I hope I'm doing okay. You're never wondering, I think I'm valued.
Yeah, the scoreboard is clear.
It's clear, right? It's 100% clear. And it's tough when things aren't going well, right? And when things aren't going well, it's important to be self-critical and have thick skin. And that's something I've actually developed over the years, right?
You got to have that tough look in the mirror and be like, why am I last?
Well, I think, part of, I said I've had good mentors, but I've also had really difficult conversations, conversations that I think could also arguably break some people, right? In terms of like how pointed they are and how like, I would say
you
aggressive.
being on the receiving end or giving...
being on the receiving end. And I try, and my team, if my team is listening to this, shout out to my team. But I think, in the early days, I was definitely less tactful with my feedback to the team. And I say the early days as if I've been here and doing this for 10 years. But even a year ago, 6 months ago, like I'm very mindful of what I'm doing and did I say the right thing? And it's not about overthinking it, but I try to be better. And
that tactical empathy.
And Chris Voss 2.0 over here.
I've read it twice in a row for any first book in my life that I read consecutively.
So I think this process of adjustment to leadership is difficult because you want to help them, but you don't realize that helping can take so many different shapes. Right? So my initial reaction, having been a good salesperson for the company, was roll up my sleeves and I'm going to do it with you. That was my first reaction. And in some cases, that's important to do. It gives you street cred. It shows your team that you got their back and you can work with them. But it also can send the wrong message. It can send the message that you're a micromanager. It can send the message that apparently nothing that I'm doing is right because he did it completely differently. And I was guilty of doing those things at the beginning, just being so mindful of, but the results at all costs. And actually, I knew this, but sometimes you need reminders from talking to people. And I talked to one of our leaders in the company, and he was just like, you have to let people learn more, and they learn the most when they fail. Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm like, I haven't given them the possibility of failing because I've been so like, we're not failing here, you know. and I'll just get in there with them and work with them like long hours and whatever was needed. And I took a different approach. Not to say that I got disconnected by it, but I'm working on helping them figure things out because I believe that, you know, these people are very capable of solving problems that are difficult.
Yeah.
And doing that on their own, and then raising their hand when they need help, and then telling me where I can help versus me telling I'm going to help here, mm-hmm. which was my initial kind of like, I would just airdrop myself into these conversations.
But it's hard because where do you draw the line? There's no handbook for this, you know? You kind of have to read the situations, and you could do the same thing, same great, I'll jump in where they need me, but even the same action can have a different result because it's different people. You have one person from maybe Costa Rica, and then you have another person from Australia or Afghanistan or Ukraine, and they will see it in a different way because I was raised in a different way, in a different environment with different parents and different values. I have a different communication style, so it's very tricky. I know that your mom has been influential in your career, obviously in your life. Tell me about Humble and Brave.
Oh, yeah. You know, sometimes I think this happens to most people. Sometimes you need to have a little bit of a pep talk from your mother, your father, you're like someone senior in your family, right?
That you respect.
And they can just ground you and just remind you like, okay, right now I'm talking to my son, my nephew, my grandson, or even my brother, right? In a very safe space.
Yeah.
And I was just sharing some problems that I was having and at one point in my career. And she just said, hey, she said like so effortlessly, just be humble, be honest, and be brave. And you'll figure it out. And I'm just like, I'm going to turn this into like something that I remember constantly. Right. And, you know, I don't think that, for example, preparation shows humility because you're like, I'm not taking anything for granted. I'm not making too many assumptions. Mm-hmm. Confidence and humility are not different. They're very different things, and they can be completely compatible. You can be a confident and assertive person with a ton of humility.
Absolutely.
Right? The honesty piece is also like you owe it not only to the people you talk to, but you owe it to yourself. Uh-huh. What about when you need to speak up, and when you need to call out the problems that you're having, and when you need help? You owe it to yourself as well. That honesty is oxygen, right? And then lastly, bravery, and there's bravery and courage are slightly different, but she said brave. And I think it has to do with just remembering what took me here and what actually got me into the first roles and what made me successful was that I was not afraid of making mistakes. Mm-hmm. As you grow up, quote unquote, it's no longer just about you. It's about your family. It's about your wife. It's about your baby. It's about your dog, right? Like there's all these things. So you just feel this pressure, but you have to remember, I'm here for a reason. What took me here? Right. And if you remember those things and that's when the whole eye of the tiger can come back in.
Yes.
You know? It just goes full circle. It's like eye of the tiger.
As we close this episode, can you talk about the eye of the tiger, man?
The eye of the tiger?
Just not the song.
Oh yeah.
It's almost like your motto, your letter to yourself when things get tough or when you have an important sales call. Eye of the tiger.
Yeah, that's basically it, right? Whenever I'm feeling like I need to prepare for something that has had a lot of build up, it could be external, it could be internal, and I'm just like, you know, and I just tell myself like Apollo Creed told Rocky in Rocky 3, eye of the tiger, stallion, eye of the tiger, and I just for some reason it's so cheesy and so ridiculous, but for some reason that is something that grounds me. And I love it. I love it because it's kind of like, it's also light. It's something that, again, I think most people can relate to, but for me, I just tell that to myself going into an important call, an important meeting. I don't think I said it when I was about to walk down the aisle, but that would have been another good moment, right?
Absolutely. I have mine too. I have a letter to myself up there, and I'm like, who am I? I am a Costa Rican Irish animal, like Conor McGregor, like. And I always picture Conor McGregor when in the weigh-ins, just being like, ah. And I'm like, let's go. And what you say, the humble be brave, man, that 100%. And be honest, because at the end of the day, one of my friends' dads, we asked him once, and he's from Venezuela, Caco's dad, Luis. I was like, what is your definition of success? And he's like, going to sleep with peace every night. And when you're humble and you're honest and you're brave, you're going to be able to sleep.
Yeah.
And to me, 100% that's success. The last question that every guest on the podcast gets is the champagne question. If we were to meet a year from now with a bottle of champagne, 2024, what are we celebrating in Gustavo's life?
Oof, that's a good question.
It's a great sales question, too, because it gets people to talk about what they're passionate about.
What's your 12-month plan? To be honest, it would be that, we're having a great time on a Sunday night, on our Sunday, having barbecue at my place, and like that, just life. To me, I don't need something specific, but if we can go back to getting together with the people you love as much as you can, as much as you want, just because you can, and just because everyone can and they will show up. That's to me the best thing ever, right? Throwing a barbecue and just knowing that you guys are going to show up.
Absolutely.
To me, that's success. I don't need a big event. I don't need anything like that. If we're all having a good time and if we're all doing well in our lives, and even if we're not, that's going to be a great reunion. Like we feed off each other's energy. And that'll be good. So a year from now, barbecue at my place.
Everybody who's hearing the podcast in about a year.
Bevan will cook though. Yeah.
Without an ACO. My friends. Oh my God. What an episode. Not just sales tips meant like high performance mindset tips. The nomad, the director of sales, the unbreakable, the unmistakable, Gustavo Chávez. Bro, thank you so much, man. I really admire you. I also admire you for breaking my picture here.
Oh, it was Liam's too. Oh my God. Terrible.
We come to the end of this man. What an episode. Thank you so much for your time. We've been trying to get this going here for months.
Yeah.
Because I really admire what you do. You turn it on and you turn it off. You've been a great influence to all of us, and we can't wait to have you back.
Thanks, man. Look forward to more episodes.
Gustavo Chávez and Stephan Dyer on the Stephan Dyer Podcast. Ciao, ciao.
Gracias por escuchar el Stephan Dyer Podcast. Arrivederci, my people.